Alright, before I start truly pissing people off, I want to go on record saying that I wouldn't call Part 5
Golden Wind? That's what they called it? What, you mean like an ass rip?
bad, just definitely not the most hard-hitting arc. Now, a lot of JoJo's fans love to call Part 3 the most overrated part, which, I mean, yeah, it is the most well-known and globally is still more or less the most popular part. But I disagree. It is rightfully rated simple as. It's badass. Has a badass protagonist with a badass manly supporting cast. Anyways, why am I bringing up Part 3 in a Part 5 of JoJo's video? Well, it's because in some obvious and in some underlying less obvious ways, they are fairly similar. Both are about tracking down their respective parts' big bad, basically. Both have been criticized for being villain of the week schlock parts. Both have arguably cool, aloof, and stoic protags. Although it's debatable how cool a wet paper bag with no personality actually is, but I'm stepping on toes a little too early perhaps. Anyways, let's first discuss why Part 3 is a better villain of the week, in that it at least had more compelling and just arguably better designed villains that were just simply very cool. Well, mostly. Part 5 does have some hard hitters as well, but it's difficult to take a villain seriously, I think, when he's named after some random entree Araki found flipping through the pages of an Italian menu while vacationing Italy. Spoilers. This man here arguably the coolest, edgiest looking antagonist in JoJo's Part 5, with the power of magnetism and the ability to manipulate and change the properties of metals in practically any which way they please, is named after this. Okay, alright, I'm running out of low-hanging fruit here, so much like Risotto's character development, let's cut this short and move on with no pleasing conclusion. Just kidding, kinda. We'll get back to Risotto in a little while. Anyway, let's talk about stands for a little bit. I'm pretty sure even if you don't watch JoJo's, you know what a fucking stand is by now, considering we JoJo's fans never shut the fuck up about them. In JoJo's Part 3, a majority of the stands are named after the major arcana of tarot cards, such as Jotaro's own stand, Star, Platinum. And unlike the stereotypical tarot reader Tinder my dog's probably cuter than you witch bitch girls that you might have experienced before online telling you that you are destined to meet the one and have 5 kids because she flipped lovers and strength. And it coincided with the gas station diarrhea you just had and on a full moon nonetheless. What the fuck am I? Anyway, my point is that tarots are actually cool here in JoJo's. Dio, meaning God in Italian and blatantly named after Dio the band, has the stand named after the tarot the world. With the ability to stop time, Dio is a massive, ripped, and imposing vampire. But more importantly, just a downright badass and iconic design. I mean, again, if you haven't watched JoJo's, I'm sure you still know who this guy is. And I don't care what anybody says, Dio is still to this day one of the coolest villains of JoJo's. Yeah, whatever, not the most complex, but just rocks a fat sack of schmeat with 2 hefty spheres. That's so much charisma, you got people in real life simping after him, even after witnessing what he did in the first part. Spoilers. Then you got, well, I'm going to be honest, the Emperor is literally just a fucking gun. But its user Whole Horse is just a really funny guy. Just a funny little character who gets some funny shenanigans. But for real though, you got the blind monk character archetype in the desert with the stand named after the Egyptian earth god Geb. That at first, yeah, I'll admit, seems kind of a little bit lame, right? His stand is, what, a little puddle? Just a little puddle of water that kills you? But if you think about it, it is actually kinda cool to utilize a scarce resource, heavily sought after in an environment where supply is either non-existent or extremely hard to find. Something poetic about using the thing that most people in this type of environment would seek out desperately as a weapon, at least in my opinion. Anyway, so I've made my point that stands in part 3 just have very cool names, just very conventionally cool names, based after terrets and gods. And at the very least, the stand users, for the most part, have actual names for people. Anyway, here's a villain from part 5 named after fishes in Italian who looks like he's been injected by that syringe from Invader Zim that slowly turns you into a fucking bratwurst.
You jerk.
Or the more normal comparison that people who don't have weird Nicktoons brain rot would say, a fucking human cucumber with the stand beach boy that is more or less a fishing pole. Fine, I am cherry picking again here, as part 5 does also, again, have some pretty cool characters and stands as well. Like, here's a guy with a fucking, just a nice suit, and a creepy ass stand that turns everybody into geriatrics. Anyway, his name is Prosciutto. Like the meat, the shit Tony Soprano would call gabagool. And actually, what the fuck, I'm thinking about it now, and why didn't Araki just name his Italian mobster characters after, I don't know, intimidating Italian characters? Like, he loves references, why not Sopranos characters? Even if just loosely to avoid copyright. I'm probably not thinking of something here. Maybe Araki's just not a fan of the Sopranos. But I mean, surely that's cooler than, I don't know, Pecorino and Romano with their intimidating stands Ed Sheeran and Lizzo. Okay, that Lizzo stand might actually be pretty terrifying. Alright, anyway, time to get way back on track again. My point is, and this may be different for everyone, but if you think about it, stands from part 3 are more memorable than part 5's. Like even the stand that's a literal gun, named the Emperor, that sick name, or the time-stopping stand, the World, another sick name, are more iconic, more memorable. If you ask me to list off all the stands from part 3 and part 5, I'll be honest, I probably couldn't, but on average, without reading or watching either part after an extended period of time, I would 9 times out of 10 be able to name more stands and characters from part 3 than I would part 5. But even if you are different, and that you just preferred having characters named after the dinners Italian families will eat every night, another more prominent and widely known issue with part 5 is that many of the legitimately cool stands and users in part 5 were kinda just wasted. I won't bloat this video with a bunch of examples, but let's go back to Risato, who again is maybe one of the coolest antagonists that has ever been in JoJo's in general, but didn't really do a whole lot, except be intimidating in the background the whole time, more or less. Anyways, Risato is the leader of La Squadra, Esecuzione. I butchered the shit out of that, I already know. Which, up until a certain point, is the main antagonistic group of Part 5, and the opposing gang to Passion, I butchered that too, and which its name translates loosely to Execution Team. In some ways, Risato was always the red herring to the main antagonist, Diavolo, but for a brief amount of time, Risato was more intimidating. They hid in the shadows and very rarely revealed their true capabilities. Now, maybe I was just looking for something more than JoJo's could ever supply me, at least while it was still a part of shonen, but to me personally, I can't quite think of a less appealing, more dissatisfactory, and just downright disrespectful way to kill a character that had such a heavy presence, and who is supposed to represent the leader of a faction of professional assassins, than to have a twink with a shitty little JJ the jet plane stand accidentally kill him, using fucking bullets. You know, the projectiles typically made of metals? The main fucking thing that this guy here should have been able to reflect or control or, I don't know, go a different direction or literally anything? Now, whatever, even if you make the argument that his bullets are made out of something else because it's his stand, so it's his stand power and not actually metal or some bullshit like that I'm not going to accept because I just don't like it, I don't care. It's still not satisfactory. And actually, real quick, maybe this is a me problem, maybe I need to rewatch it, reread it, whatever. Why isn't this man just walking around with a second layer of iron skin shielding him constantly? Araki, I think, underestimates how powerful Risotto's ability actually makes him. Anyways, Narancia, this character here, who made the killing shots, didn't even really have a good clear shot either. And truthfully, this whole part was when my interest in part 5, continuing onwards, fucking cliff dived. Now, a quick disclaimer that maybe I should have made a little while ago is that Araki was suffering with some pretty severe depression and some problems in his life while writing Part 5, and has gone on record to state multiple times that he envisioned Part 5 in different ways, and lots of things were cut due to his depression and, well, other things. The story was supposed to be a little more graphic in nature, more mature, and there was going to be more betrayal, and honestly, I so badly wish that I could go back in time and pump Araki full of SSRIs and bananas. But anyway, tasteless jokes aside, that was what Part 5 should have been. More betrayal. That's what I want in a rival gangs themed part of JoJo's. And at this point, where Risotto died in one of the most blatantly uninteresting ways, I just lost interest. I had already known about Part 5's complications due to Araki just going through it, and I'm happy I did, because if I didn't, I might have been insulted that the show took a massive shit all over my eyes and ears and overall synapses when this happened. But this is when I lost interest and, well, realized that Araki just probably didn't know where to take Risotto. I mean, if you think about it, Risotto had arguably the second or third most powerful stand in this part, at least at this point in the manga, and was a very powerful character. And I get being under time constraints, and, well, I don't personally have depression, but I can definitely understand how this may impact the writing process. I doubt that I probably would have done much better, but my criticism remains. And mostly, I just think it's tragic that theoretically one of the most interesting parts of JoJo's ended up just kind of being okay. It's just hard for me to not come up with a million different cooler routes that could have happened. It at least mildly inspires me to write up my own gang story, where if I were to utilize these characters, maybe I would spin it to where instead of Fugo just fucking off and Risotto dying to Narancia's greatest asshole, you have 3 very interesting big bads if you include Fugo's cut betrayal that never actually happened. And you could have them all playing vital roles up until the last moment of the series. I personally think it's a cop-out to say Fugo had to go because his stand was too busted, considering Diavolo was over there at Premiere clipping out fucking reality and Risotto could literally turn your blood into razor blades. So I'm just not going to accept that stupid argument. In fact, I'm gonna say they could have kept each other in check with how powerful they all were. Any one wrong move by either party and the other two could kill each other, etc. And this could leave a lot of room for constant moments of betrayal, until eventually, you do actually decide to end the part. Now, writing is hard, especially when you only have a couple days to write a script. So I'm sorry I couldn't come up with some more hard-hitting examples, but honestly, anything would have been better than Little Tyke's plane stand killing a major mob boss. Lastly, I want to touch upon the main protagonist and the supporting characters of Part 5. Jotes comes back briefly and has Koichi go to Italy to check up on Giorno to make sure Giorno's not a twisted fucking psychopath like his father. Well, his other father, but not in a homosexual way, but a more necrotic parasitic head transmigration sort of way. And then, through like a few mild silly interactions that, I don't know, they're just very silly. Koichi trying to have a conversation with Giorno, but Giorno's just being a shy little silly billy. And nothing really happening. Koichi just kind of fucks off back to report to Jotaro that everything's fine. And that's that. And then we finally get to experience Giorno. But thankfully this guy comes in and does most of the work of being a real character. Well, up until he dies. But doesn't die and becomes a zombie or something. This part of the series irritates me because there's no clear explanation as to why he's even still fucking alive, and whenever you try to get somebody to explain it to you, what happens is there is no overlap, no continuity between anybody's arguments or reasoning, and everybody has their own fucking theory. And like many other things that happen in this part of JoJo's, it just feels like blatant plot device bullshit that wasn't even trying to be hidden or disguised in any way at all. But simply that the character is pretty important, so they need to be kept alive. But anyway, there's people within the JoJo's fanbase that get their rocks off of complaining and critiquing Jotes for being apparently bland and boring and whatnot. And also, these people don't understand the cool stoic masculine archetype that Jotaro represented. The fact is that Araki based a lot of Jotaro off of Clint Eastwood characters, more specifically in older westerns. Jotaro is a good character. In every part he's in, he fucking drippin' in part 6 especially, but more importantly, Giorno is mostly just a lamer Jotaro. He's quiet and has a stoic demeanor like Jotes. He's also one of the smarter protagonists like Jotaro, but where they differ, and in contrast to what fans who apparently just skipped part 3 think, Jotaro actually at least has charisma and charm. Jotaro is a character that if you don't much appreciate older anime and its representations of the stoic and quiet drifter type, or masculine man who says few words but whose words have heavy impact or great meaning, then yeah, of course you're not going to like Jotaro. This doesn't make Jotaro a bad protagonist, it means you have your own biases, likes and dislikes. Join the club. Now do I think Giorno is bad? Not entirely. But I would go so far to say that aside from a few fight scenes, mostly, Giorno is arguably the least interesting protagonist. And I find this incredibly disappointing, considering Giorno has every element and component there to produce one of the most, if not the most interesting character of JoJo's. You have a protagonist who is the son of some insane and unholy combination of one of the most saint-like characters and one of the most evil and vile characters in the series, who is now struggling to somewhat find their own identity in life, and has been more or less swept up into a gang. Giorno should be a complete and total conflicting mess of morals and emotions, and yeah, I know Araki did make some attempts at having Giorno be somewhat morally gray, but it wasn't really enough, and it wasn't very satisfying, or even sometimes convincing. Again, some of this could be chopped up due to time constraints, and the publisher maybe just being shitty in general. And again, Araki was a pretty depressed man during all this, but regardless, to me, Giorno and much of Part 5 in general should have, in a different reality, been my favorite part. Italy is a great setting, and I will admit I have a real-life bias for all things Italian, but more especially and specifically espresso and pasta. Really not a lot more I need in my life. Anyway, to get back on track for the millionth time again, I think all the components were here. You had what simply should have been the most interesting protagonist, you had a great setting, and you had some of the best main villains that the series has seen, but unfortunately you also had a man struggling with intense depression and a publisher that was maybe not the most accommodating. And so this is what we got. I've been pretty scathing for most of this review, I realize, so I suppose to finish off on a lighter and less inflammatory note, I do legitimately think it's impressive that Part 5 still ended up being as decent as it is. All things considered, and again, you put me in that situation and who knows what kind of a terrible and uninteresting mess it could have been. Or maybe it wouldn't have been worse. Maybe I could have done better. I'm not gonna make that claim though. All in all, I don't hate Part 5. It's just the most disappointing part to me. There's probably other things that I could have mentioned in more detail, like with Fugo. Maybe I could have touched upon more of the interesting villains of Part 5, etc. But I think I'm going to call it here. I've said my piece and I've made my qualms apparent, and it doesn't really bring me any joy to shit on any part of JoJo's, considering I kind of just like most of it. Obviously, I'm biased towards the earlier parts. I like manly looking things. I think big, cool, ripped buff guys is badass, and that's my bias. And with that, I hope you all experience a true Agarthan Ascension someday. But for real, have a good one.